Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Unemployed Film Snobs. My name is Brian Delgado.
I'm Joshua Mejia.
And I'm Letona.
And today, our episode is going to be about video game adaptations, whether that be in film and movies. And really, just to start off with this conversation, I wanted to talk about, do we feel like video game stories are better stories in terms of storytelling than even like your blockbuster films nowadays? So that's going to be our first topic. I'm going to go ahead and drive, and I'm going to kick it off with you guys. What do you guys think? Do you think video game stories are becoming better at storytelling than like your actual regular movies?
Start us off with that, Letona?
Yeah, I guess the big reason I thought we were kind of talking about this week is one, at the time of this recording, Five Nights at Freddy's is out. And two, Spider-Man recently just had been out it's going to be out for quite a minute by the time everyone sees this. You finished it.
I did.
You finished watching it.
Yes. Side note, I don't own any recent game consoles. I just have a 360. So a lot of new games I just watch on YouTube.
Yeah. And I'm almost done. I'm almost done with the game. And admittedly, like, every time a big game like this, especially part of the Sony catalog, comes out, right? Like, everyone's always talking about how good is the story. And I'm just wondering a little bit, like, I feel like, I played God of War Ragnarok this year.
Great game too.
A great game. And it seems like, the response to like a lot of the most recent blockbusters, whether it be Marvel movies, DC movies, your pretty normal blockbusters, are just not matching up with like the level of quality of storytelling being put into like AAA, like at least, some of these like bigger games, right? I really liked God of War, like that, especially Ragnarok. I thought the storytelling there was incredible, really well thought out. The performances are rivaling that of like anyone doing like your current like, or not even rivaling, surpassing. Like all the performances we're seeing, and whether it be like Ant-Man this year, or by the time this is almost out, I'm sure the Marvels will almost be out. Like they're being hard to compare anymore, because I think they are telling better stories in some ways.
Yeah, and I think a big factor in it too is that it's just like any form of filmmaking or storytelling, that this is a different way of telling stories. Telling stories through a video game is different than telling stories in film or animated or TV show. So you have a lot of liberties and freedoms that you can get by telling a story in a video game. You can go so much more, you can go so much less, right? But there's always that kind of like give and take, where it's like there's limits, but then there's not that many limits in terms of what platform you choose to tell a story on.
Yeah, so I guess this is my turn, right, to discuss? So, I mean, look, I've always been more of a gamer, like, at heart, so I've always been in the consensus that video games do and always will have the capability of telling a great story. Just like any book can, just like any film can or TV show. But, right now, the current state, I definitely feel like they are telling great stories. But also, I mean, just like anything else, there's influences. So, just like the best video game story might have an influence because of a certain film or a TV show, vice versa as well. That's why we're seeing a lot of adaptations now. Hollywood seems to see that there's a lot of good potential storytelling in adapting a video game. So, yes, definitely, I agree. I mean, I am a little bit biased. I think video games do tell better stories, but that's also because there's a capability of having the controller in hand, and you sympathize more with whatever's going on in the story because you're the person controlling. Now, there's even some video games that have like diverted, like BioShock. Would you kindly, So that even has put a twist on it because it is a video game. So how Hollywood wants to adapt that story is a different entire subject itself. But yes, I definitely agree that video games definitely tell better stories.
Because there are just some stories that we're thinking of. I know we talk all the time, and we're big fans of The Last of Us. Red Dead 2 is probably among the top 5 probably best video game stories ever told. Yeah. Like, it really is an incredible feat. I don't know. Is there any you guys have in mind that you've like, especially in your case, since you kind of watch them almost more like movies or TV shows, even, right?
Yeah, I think that's also interesting too, because the fact that you watch somebody play it, like a walkthrough.
Yeah.
I just real quick, I remember like I told you, right, my mom's like first glimpse into The Last of Us wasn't even the TV show. I literally showed her like a gameplay walkthrough. Because the cutscenes are like the direction that the cutscenes are shown feels like a movie.
Yeah.
So even for someone like that doesn't play video games, they can enjoy the story just as well. And I mean, you're watching them, but heck, I've seen some people even they've never like touched a controller before, and there is ways where they can still play them even if they've never had any prior experience, and they can still enjoy said story, especially in Sony's PlayStation like exclusives.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say, because I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to gaming. I do love gaming, just gaming consoles and just games in general are kind of expensive.
$70 nowadays.
It adds up. So
yeah, $70 for a game.
Yes, that's the biggest thing. But when I do play games still on my 360, whatever games I can get my hands on.
But the 360, I mean, I mean, I know we're like 2 console generations ahead now, but the 360, that's where for me personally, that's where it started really. Like that's where I realized there was potential in single player games telling great stories.
Yeah.
Red Dead 1 came out on the 360. That was my first moment where I realized, wow, I've been moved by a video game, and that was in the 360 era.
Or like even just the Grand Theft
Auto games, yeah.
Grand Theft Auto 5, the most recent one. I know they're coming out with 6 pretty soon.
Yeah. Grand Theft Auto 4, which was on the 360, that was probably like the darkest GTA story, and I swear to you, that's like the most underrated.
While we're at it, in the same generation on the Sony side, I mean, Uncharted.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, Uncharted
was the like big like, oh, this is like the Indiana Jones like video game everyone was waiting for. Like it had the big cinematic like, like when Uncharted 2 came out and had the train sequence. And like crazy enough, like I'm watching Mission Impossible this year, and has a similar train sequence.
Well, didn't
they, I forgot about that.
Didn't they say that they were inspired by
the
train
so
sequence?
There you go. Like, it's a full circle, guys.
Yeah. That's why I bring this up. Is like like I really enjoyed Mission Impossible this year.
Yeah.
But like I can't help but like it's very clear that like video games are pushing filmmakers to try to like replicate and do things that only like you thought you could see in video games.
Unless you're Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise will go for it. But right, like this is what I mean, and we're talking about an action sequence here for sure. But I guess this is what I mean. Is like and we can get into a little bit. We've been trying to be wary about getting into TV, but with this conversation, we can't help but actually talk about The Last of Us on HBO, and like, and I know this is something you brought up too, Mejia. Was we could talk a little bit about like. How where it decides to diverge compared to its faithfulness to the source material.
Yeah.
But like it kind of I thought was like for the most part like a perfect adaptation. Like I think it diverged where it needed to.
Yeah.
But also replicated every like major moment that I needed it to.
Well, so that's the thing though, about The Last of Us. I mean, Craig Mazin, the showrunner, I mean, he also is a gamer. So I think that has a lot to say as well. I think, if I'm not mistaken, even like the entire production company that worked on The Last of Us HBO show, they were all gamers. They were all huge fans of the game. So I think that tells a lot, because I wanted, and I don't know if I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but I feel like that's what was wrong with like prior like video game adaptations, whether they were film or TV shows, because a lot of these directors, they only know like Hollywood. They only know film. They've never played. They've never touched a console before. They've never played. Maybe they Pac-Man or something. But like they don't play current modern video games. So they still have like this like stigma maybe. And I don't want to discredit anybody, but a lot of people still think that video games are just childish. Like it's just like a quick casual pickup, and then I lose, and then that's it. So I feel like with The Last of Us, you had people that maybe like their passion for video game storytelling started with The Last of Us, and then they had a chance to hone up their skills and showcase that in the television show.
Yeah.
So that did help a lot, for sure. There is some criticisms, hardly any affected, things like that. But I think for the most part, I agree with you.
And it'll be an interesting discussion maybe later on, probably not for this episode, if we build upon it at least, is that how well do some of the voice actors translate to actual, TV and just being an actual actor. I mean, voice acting is actual acting, but translating
it's a very different skill set
to, just actually, being on set, being actually
so
and stuff. Because for Last of Us, weren't there a few of the voice actors who went into The Last of Us?
So there's motion cap.
Yeah.
There's a amazing technology now where it's motion cap, and I've seen some I follow some of these motion. So Roger Clark, who's Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2, he actually argued recently that he doesn't like it when you discredit motion cap, as in there's motion capture performances and then acting. He argues that they're both the same, and I agree. If not, it's actually more talent, because if you ever seen the studio where they do the motion capture, it's literally just the two actors, Joel and Ellie maybe, right? And then it's just a bunch of balls all over them to record their facial expressions, etc. And maybe just a prop. If they're holding a gun, it's probably just a fake toy gun. So I think it's more talent to have to use your imagination in order for you
to put into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Create the space in your mind.
Because I did see some BTS of the Last of Us video game, and a lot of it was they just had they just kind of made a metal little square to be a desk or something.
Yeah, so exactly.
So it's you have to have a lot of imagination to view the entire scene as it would be in the video game, in this just random gray garage looking area.
Yeah. And also, speaking about motion capture, so Neil Druckmann, on The Last of Us, we keep talking about The Last of Us because it feels like it's the most successful video game adaptation. But Neil Druckmann even said that, and by the way, Neil Druckmann is the co-president of Naughty Dog, which is the video game developers that created The Last of Us and Uncharted. Both being adapted are already adapted as film and TV. So he even talked about how the thing about motion capture is that's the con, but then also the pro is if you like a certain camera angle, you can work all of that in post. But you can't do that in the film. If you're shooting a certain camera angle, that's the shot you got and that's it. But in video games, you can kind of tailor that. So there's also that pro as well.
I mean, unless you're James Cameron and develop a whole thing to...
Well, that's true. That's true, yeah. So I just thought that was an interesting thing that he mentioned about the difference between shooting on site and then a video game motion capture.
Real quick, because you brought up Neil Druckmann, and I feel like I can trace this back, and I'm sure there's others, but I want to trace this back to someone like Hideo Kojima, who's the creative director for was the creative director for the Metal Gear franchise, and now has his own studio and is creating his own projects. But it's kind of interesting now that we know these names like Hideo Kojima, Neil Druckmann. I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting at this moment, but we treat them the same with the same reverence we do
Martin Scorsese,
or Nolan, because they're the people leading these projects and telling these big stories.
Yeah, I mean, and in their field, because it is, even though it's the same umbrella of media and storytelling, it is a different field. It's a different subfield. But in their field, they could kind of be seen as the Scorsese of their field. So it's
I mean, I follow Hideo Kojima on Twitter and X, whatever. And I see him meeting up with Jordan Peele. I see him meeting up with all these A-list celebrities now, or actors, right?
And so many of Guillermo del Toro is in
Death Stranding. In Death Stranding.
Or at least his body is, and he's voiced by somebody else. Nicholas Winding Refn, who directed Drive, also in Death Stranding.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, it's just all his buddies are in this
Norman
game.
Reedus as the protagonist for Death Stranding.
I just won't be surprised if we find out Jordan Peele's in his next game or something.
That'd be cool.
I guess this also brings me to just like the question that I think can like round out this discussion a bit. It's just, what do blockbusters need to do to compete? What are they missing here? I have an answer, but I'm going to toss it back to you guys because I think it's worth talking about. Because
I think in some blockbusters and movie situations, it's just they need better storytelling. I feel like they're kind of cutting corners a bit to give something to the audience as fast as possible, because there's all these like quote unquote competing studios and competing like universes and stuff, where it's like let's compete, like Marvel versus DC. And I think someone recently mentioned from DC that we need to do what Marvel's doing, like we need to get stuff out, and that's why they rushed their universe to get out, because they wanted to compete with Marvel. When I think if they would have taken it slow like Marvel did, by now they would be just as good as Marvel.
For me, I feel like it has more to do with taking a chance on new ideas.
Yeah.
I no spoilers, but I think about The Last of Us Part 2. And even Neil Druckmann, I keep mentioning that because it's literally one of my favorite games. If not, like, I think it's probably one of the best games ever, especially Part 2. But the idea that Sony went along with Part 2, I mean...
Yeah, it is a bold decision.
It's a bold decision.
Not to spoil anything.
Not to spoil anything, but the fact that... Sony took a chance on Naughty Dog, knowing what everything gets pitched.
Yeah.
Whether it's film, television, whatever, everything gets pitched, and if you don't have the funds for it, it's over.
Yeah.
Like, you can try to make a film with that storytelling, but if you don't have the funds, it's not going to work out. But it's like Scorsese doing Killers of the Flower Moon. He had that money, he has the funds, and he was able to tell a great story, and I think it's doing pretty well in the box office for the movie it is.
Yeah.
Same thing with Sony. Sony just took a chance, and I feel like that's the reason why Sony is now expanding more into, like, I think Sony even did like Sony Studios now?
Yeah.
And that's because they just took a chance, and I feel like a lot of Hollywood needs to do that more often, but also not just take a chance, and even like hire people that know what they're doing in terms of the source material. Don't hire people. Don't just do what is the right word for it? Like, just don't focus on the business so much.
That it kind of like cuts corners on the story.
Stop cutting corners.
It's like the
Take
algorithm a bit, right? Like they're trying to checklist everything. Like, okay, it's like if the worst version of The Last of Us would have been if it came out maybe a decade ago, and they were trying to like checklist it and be like, oh, okay, like it's got zombies, so let's make it. What do people like? Okay, it's The Walking Dead. Yeah. And it became like a Walking Dead clone.
Yeah,
right?
because it came out in 2013, and you know what? Actually, though, mind you, that's also one thing to keep in mind. By the time Last of Us came out, people were getting sick of the zombie genre. So the fact that even part 1, I said part 2, but even part 1, just take a chance, and it's a zombie show, and people are getting sick of it. But I think the fact that Sony still took a chance, and look where we're at now, like with The Last of Us. Same thing with Uncharted.
Yeah, I think too that it's not just them taking a chance on like the storytelling, or like what you've been describing right now. I feel like it's taking a chance on different filmmakers, different creators. Like taking a chance on like someone that because there's usually some people you usually go to for certain things. But I think if you take a chance on like new people for new fresh looks, new fresh ideas, and especially new people who like value the story and value like what the source material is and do play video games, I think it makes it even better.
I think that's for sure. And we've seen so many adaptations that clearly, like, the person directing was not, like, a fan of the material, or let alone touched it.
Or even understood it,
understood it. Not to, like, out at, like, any films that anyone may enjoy or whatever. I feel like as popular as it's never been more popular.
More than ever, yeah.
More than ever. Like, video games are cool. Like, everyone has a PS5 now. Like, and Spider-Man 2 is being advertised on buses and stuff.
Even the Las Vegas Sphere.
Even the Las Vegas
PlayStation.
Sphere.
So, just side note, like, I think it's like a million. No, it's like
It's
like
a big
200
number.
It's a big number.
In the millions.
So the fact that Sony gambled and like they were willing to spend money.
Mm-hmm.
That's that I can't stress that enough. They were willing to take a chance and spend money,
Well,
even on the marketing for the sphere
Yeah.
of their game, which I feel like they didn't need to do that.
I mean, Spider-Man 2's already established within 2 different video games, and like it's already like, I mean, the first one too, people were very excited about it because we haven't had really a good Spider-Man game since like Spider-Man 1,
or
2,
even a superhero game,
maybe 3 from like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that's true. Like superhero games haven't been the greatest. I think Insomniac, right, is setting a huge level, especially with this new one. Because this new one's amazing. Again, I only watched it, but it's I think one of the best games ever this year. Like it's really up there. And they got Wolverine coming out. They said that they might do a Venom solo game, that they might do a Spider-Man 3 game. So it's like if they create the whole, like I think you mentioned this, not like on the podcast, but just either in pre-meetings or like on social media, where I'm all for this whole Insomniac universe of like Marvel superheroes that they're creating, because it seems pretty good.
Oh, and just real quick, I want to mention something. So I don't know if like you guys have ever seen the irony of me like doing this, right? But the fact that I'm willing to play superhero games but not watch superhero content, I think speaks volumes, because I think you're a superhero and you're playing as a superhero, that seems more believable to me than just watching it. That's just my opinion.
I think the other thing too is, I mean, it's with like Spider-Man, like there's no limitations really.
Yeah.
Like with the movies, like everyone's like, oh, why isn't Robert Downey Jr. in like, I don't know, this like random one-off movie that Marvel's doing or whatever.
Yeah.
And you have all these actors, and it's all, everyone already knows, like because of social media, like what's going on behind the scenes. And in video games, you just don't have those limitations anymore. Like think about all the characters and villains are allowed to do in these games.
Yeah. And then that's true, because like with Spider-Man 2, even though like I followed it pretty prominently, like through its like process of being created and stuff, and updates, I didn't know a lot of who was going to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't, like a couple of the people that when I was watching the gameplay, the walkthrough of it, I was like, oh shit, like this guy's in it, like that's so cool. So it's just like I think that also gives to the factor of it being such a fresh game every time.
Did you guys see that the Bodega Cats Spider-Man like mascots that you can see in Spider-Man 2? Nathan Fillion
and Alan Tudyk.
Yeah, they voice those characters. It's such a small, tiny thing, but I think like the fact that they're, even these actors from a different medium are willing to go into video games and just
like a little cameo.
Cameos like that is
like
so cool. That's also one thing to keep in mind. I mean, for the longest time, video games always just felt like it was like its own world, kind of like how people treat anime. Like now everybody's like, people are open about anime. Like, hey, I like anime. Before it was like, I like anime, but I'm not out there about it because not everybody knows what I'm talking about. Now it feels like it's overlapping. Everything is just overlapping.
I feel like it's a big part of that too, is Guillermo del Toro. Because in one of his Oscar speeches, he was just like, animated movies are cinema. They're not just for kids; they're for adults. Like they're real movies. And like,
animation is cinema. Animation is not a genre, and animation is ready to be taken to the next step. We are all ready for it.
And like just like how he lent his physical image to what was it, Death Stranding?
Death Stranding.
I feel like he's one of the very few storytellers that are like,
he's appreciative of
he's just of everything, like storytelling as a medium, whether it's video games, anime, live action, TV shows. I think he's just in it.
Any other
no, I was just gonna say, like, just thinking about just like, again, like what do blockbusters need to do. I think you guys are right. I think as per usual, it comes down to the writing, and you're right, studios need to stop playing it safe. Like, like I'll sit here as like the MCU defender, but like I'm sitting there like watching Ant-Man 3, like they needed to take a harder swing with this. Like you have a villain in this movie that's supposed to be like your next Thanos, and the movie still like feels like it's playing it too safe. And the ending was like one where I was like, guys, come on, there was a way to end this where you could have like really like you know, everyone could have been like, wow, okay, like this is why you need to go see this movie. And
Yeah.
you know, not to like make it too heavy on just like superhero stuff, but like again, like God of War, Elden Ring. I know that's a game that like is like complicated because it doesn't really have a story, but it has a world that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to be in, and like I'm not getting that feeling from blockbusters. And I think that's just the problem, right? Is like they're like, you know, the creator we spoke about just a couple weeks ago has really great world investment. The story's not like perfect, but like the world investment's amazing in it. So there's at least one that's doing something right.
Yeah.
And I want movies to do that more. I want to feel like I want to be part of that world, not just like I'm this passenger watching, you know, images move on a screen. And I think like we said, like it just has to come down to the writing and figuring out, you know, like how to get the world where it is, and then ease up on the visual effects. You know, like. You know, as much as I love The Mandalorian, the volume technology, you know, this like 3D screen that like comes out and it's helping the actors, like I'm feeling it too much now, and it's like it feels like people are just acting in a one room, and you know, then I watch Andor and like they're using physical locations,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like just getting frustrating, and it's just like, yeah, like
Playing it safe.
it's playing it safe. And I know this sounds almost hypocritical because I'm like talking about like, you know, the movies in physical spaces. Meanwhile, like I'm saying, video games are a complete digital like platform.
Yeah.
But like they're creating a world that's like 10 times more interesting that I want to run around in.
Yeah.
You know, like
Well,
like I said, I'm almost done with Spider-Man and I'm totally captivated. I'm like, damn, like why would I ever go like? Not, I mean, I'm not like crazy about Spider-Man 3, but why would I go ever rewatch that movie now when I have a better Venom story being told in this game?
I think what it is too, what Brian mentioned when we first started driving, was that, you know, because you're actually physically controlling the characters. So I think that makes a difference because you could explore the world the way you want to, the way you feel like it. So it's not like, you know, oh, you're limited by by the viewpoint of the director and the cinematographer.
Yeah.
You know, you're not limited by anything. You can go anywhere you want.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to discuss about why I think some video game stories are better off just being a video game and not being adapted. But
So yeah, we're gonna do something a little bit different this episode.
Yeah.
We're gonna go get some coffee, and we'll be back. We're gonna go record this as a two-parter. So by the time we're back, we'll probably be in the exact same place. So Brian, if you want to give us the clap magic again.
Alrighty. So we're gonna go get our coffee, and we'll be right back. And we're back. And so what we were talking about is, so I feel like not a lot of, so I mean, this is what I'm worried about. I'm worried that Hollywood starts seeing success in video game adaptations, and rightfully so, right? Some, you know, but I feel like there's some stories like that. I mean, yeah, they can be adapted and they'll be done pretty well, but it won't have that same resonance or like impact as if when you were playing it, because it is a video game. I feel like because it's a video game, it works better in that regard. And I think one of the examples I wanted to give out was Red Dead Redemption 2. That seems to be like the most, because it's the most popular game so far of like...
People talk about it.
People talk about it. And it's been 5 years now at the time of this recording. So one of the things... So I personally am against it because I don't think that Red Dead Redemption 2 needs to be adapted into a movie or a TV show. Maybe a TV show, but everybody is talking about it as a movie adaptation. I don't think it'll be well because the story's good, but I think part of the impact is that you're playing as Arthur Morgan. You're going through this experience. A lot of people, I mean, it works like GTA where you're doing a bunch of bad things and there's this honor system. The honor system helps you, like, helps the moral ground. Also, the story plays a lot into it. But all of that just kind of dissipates if you just adapt it to a film. I think it's like similar to like Max Payne when they adapted Max Payne. Like it's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same resonance. So, yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and start driving. So.
Just to kind of like we were saying it a little bit in our little coffee break. The truth about like GTA and Red Dead, and honestly for a lot of video games, is that they're all really inspired by movies.
Yeah.
And you can see the influences clear as day sometimes, especially for like Hideo Kojima projects, you know? So what happens when you have to like get a video game that's like a 20 to 30 hour experience that was inspired by other movies, and then you kind of have to like reverse engineer it and distill it to a 2-hour experience? Like, what does that become?
Because I feel like in that case, you know, you're taking a lot out. Like, you're very much being very picky and choosy with what you're lending to the, you know, live action screen.
Yeah, because like, look, if you adapt Red Dead Redemption 2, I think it's like that thing where it's fan service. It just feels like fan service, to be honest with you. Because if you adapt it, let's like genuinely thinking, you gotta look at it like, forget that you had like the best time of your experience playing Red Dead Redemption 2. If it's, you know, if it gets adapted into a movie, what makes it stand out apart from like your typical Western movie, like a Clint Eastwood movie? What differences are going to be? There's already a lot of good Western movies already made out there. What makes Red Dead Redemption 2 stand out? You know?
I mean, and I think what you said earlier, it's honestly pretty true. It's just fan service. Like, you kind of like, if you don't pick the right places to adapt, and you cut out the places that players like the best, then, you know, people are going to hate it. The fans are going to hate it, right? But if you pick out the things that are the best that players did like, people are going to love it. But that's essentially fan service. You know, you're just choosing the best moments to thing. I think a good like middle ground is, you know, getting inspiration from it and adapting it, but also kind of making it its own thing. Because in the end, I feel like it has to do that. Like, it kind of has to become its own thing and want to really live. Or else, if you just try to adapt it exactly the same with a video game, it won't work. Because, you know, it's not gonna be like a 20, 30-hour movie or like series or whatever. So I mean, if you make a movie out of it, it's a lot harder because you got max 3 hours to play with stuff from like a 30-hour game. But if you make a TV series, which is a little more different than the movie format, then, you know, you can get more of a long 10-hour, you know, like experience from it. So you can get a little longer from it. But I think it's just hard to do. You know,
it kind of reminds me of a TV show. Like, some things are better as a TV show. Like, for example, like we brought up Last of Us. Originally, Last of Us, like in 2014, Sam Raimi was supposed to direct as the Last of Us movie.
Right.
And honestly, that wouldn't, I mean, as much as I love Sam Raimi, but I don't think it would have done it justice just because of the length of it.
I mean, he said that, I believe, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just not to cut you off, I just thought, like, you know, as we kind of start moving into our final segment, I thought like a good roundabout way to think about it is, and I realized I should have just brought this up earlier, is, you know, a good sort of like from game to movie adaptation. Admittedly, this is a board game rather, but like, I think the best way to kind of like approach like video game adaptations is consider how players play the game. And I don't mean that as like, oh, like, you know, like with Assassin's Creed, make sure you include the parkour.
Yeah.
But like,
I mean, that is an important factor.
That is an important factor.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, with like the Dungeons and Dragons movie this year, there are scenes in that movie that emulate how people would actually play the game, rather than like how the game is meant to be played. Like the way certain scenes play out, and they stay within the like the context of the world. And I think that's like maybe sometimes an approach you have to have with it. So I'm not saying that makes like a great adaptation for Red Dead, because I think you're right. I think it is just too big and like too inspired by other things, where if you distill it, it won't have the same impact. But for other things, and I think this moves us right into our final segment, is like finding a video game that like makes like a really good adaptation. And so the idea, I think, was going to be like, why not, let's, as our final segment for today's show, is like, let's pitch some things we want to see. What's a video game we've been wanting to see as a movie? Yeah. And like, what, like, I don't know, I just thought that could be fun. So if I have one, if anyone wants to start though.
Yeah, I mean, I can mention mine. So mine would be BioShock, but here's also the thing. I think if you
The original
BioShock 1, yes. So BioShock would work great, but it wouldn't work great adapting it just from the source material itself, because the whole twist there is because it's a video game. That's the only reason why it works. But there's so much lore to the city of Rapture that I think the fall of Rapture would be a good movie. That would make a great movie. There's like a voice log of Diane McClintock, and she falls in love with Andrew Ryan, who is the mayor of the creator of the city Rapture, the underwater city, and she falls in love there is a civil war that brews, and she gets caught up between that, feels betrayed by Andrew Ryan, and sides with Atlas, which is like this the oppressor that is fighting for. I feel like that whole storyline, the plot is already there, and also given the fact that this is all coming from like a voice logs, like collectibles that you can collect. It's not even from the game itself that you play. So I think that would work better, and it'd be more streamlined.
Yeah, and it's also like a story that like people haven't seen. It could be a good way to introduce them to the world of BioShock. So you don't throw them in, but you give them this like
taste.
Taste of it before, and then once you watch the movie, you want more of that world, and you already kind of have its sequel.
Yes.
Yeah.
You go home and you play the game.
Yeah, literally, because no spoilers, but right after that, it's like.
Because I mean, BioShock in general, like the whole franchise, is kind of convoluted as a story. Like there's this like.
When
you
exactly.
Look at the overarching.
Yeah.
Like
so
there's a lot.
And Rapture's always been like more resonant with people, and I think it works best as a movie, for sure.
Yeah.
What about you?
I guess for mine, I kind of have two of them.
Okay.
One of them is a well-known game. The other one's probably not so well-known, or maybe for very older people. But my first one is Legend of Zelda. I feel like that would make a pretty cool, like kind of like Witcher-esque, like Dungeons and Dragons type movie.
Yeah.
Like very just outdoors. Magical realms, all that stuff. I think it would just be an interesting movie, or even series, TV show. I think it might work better as a TV show, maybe to be honest.
Okay.
Do you have like a specific era in mind for Zelda? Because obviously, like every game that comes out has like a little bit of a unique twist or flavor to it.
Just to start off, maybe just the first one.
Okay, just keep it classic.
Yeah, just keep it classic. Start off with the first one, because I think I first played it on the Game Boy. I think like way back when. But my second movie, or second like idea for pitching like to a live action version would be, this is from the GameCube days. It's called Beautiful Joe. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that game.
I only know that
Joe.
character through Marvel vs. Capcom.
Yeah, so Beautiful Joe is basically a game about an ordinary guy, literally an average Joe, who gets superpowers to save his girlfriend in movie land. Right? And I just remember from when I was a kid, I think it'd be very interesting to play with. Maybe as like a limited series, maybe as a movie. Like if they do like a very, short trilogy, they could probably work with a lot. But there's just a lot to go with it, because it's kind of like on like the Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic. Well, not the aesthetic, but like the way the gameplay is. From what I remember, it was a while ago. So from what I remember, it's kind of the same thing like that. You got like this flat little plane that you're kind of just jumping around to. So I think that would be a pretty cool. I would like to see it. I think you can do a lot of creative freedom with it.
Yeah. I guess it's my turn.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I was thinking a lot about this question because I have a lot of things I would love to see. Like, people have been waiting for the Metal Gear Solid movie for years.
Isn't Henry Cavill attached to that?
I think it's Oscar Isaac.
Okay, Oscar Isaac.
But people are waiting for that. This is more of an inside joke for us, but I'm a big fan of Kingdom Hearts. I did a presentation on this for a party we did a while back. But if I actually had to pick something that I would really want to see translated into a movie, there was a smaller game that came out, I want to say like a couple years ago, called Deathloop.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, and I played it over the pandemic, and it was so much fun. Don't get me wrong, it's not like a perfect game,
Right.
but like I think its story in essence like totally works for like a 2-hour movie, because essentially it's about a guy who wakes up in this very like Art Deco steampunk kind of island. It's very like 60s kind of sciencey style, and he's like in this like death loop where every time he dies he wakes up in the same place.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Kind of like Groundhog Day, Edge of Tomorrow, and he's like in this rivalry with this other girl who doesn't want to let him break out of the loop. And his whole goal is that he has to kill 7 scientists in one night and then escape in this rocket. And it's like, once you kind of get the rhythm of the game, you start moving quick. The girl that's hunting you down could be played by like another player, so they'll hop into your game and try to kill you. And like it's really fun because you're trying to be like, okay, I gotta keep an eye out while I'm on my mission. Like I think it's just like the story is so like simple, and we've seen like we mentioned that, and even like Happy Death Day, right? That's another like one of those loop movies.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just a really easy translation. And you gave me a really good idea during our coffee break, is get Ryan Johnson to direct. Let him get that Looper visual style.
It is not because you're a big fan of him.
Not
I
because-
genuinely think because there's things similar to what he's already done, like Looper.
And then give
And
the
then
like
Knives
Knives Out
Out,
kind
yeah.
of humor in it. And I was even thinking for casting, because, you know, you got your main character, and I was thinking maybe like Idris Elba as your lead, because he could lead any movie.
Yes.
He's so good at everything he does. And for the girl, his rival, Juliana, I was thinking get Storm Reed.
Storm Reed is really underrated.
Super underrated actress. Love her in literally everything. And they already have some shared screen time in the Suicide Squad,
Yeah.
the James Gunn directed version, and they're really good together. And I think they would be perfect for this project, especially at the ages they're at. And that's just kind of visually, like, I think it's a really great visual game. I think it like can be a perfect 2-hour movie that like kind of like, I don't know, I think it would just like be just a lot of fun as like genre fare. Maybe not like an Oscar winner or anything,
No, of course.
but like
you never know.
you never know.
I feel like it could be. I feel like that movie. That if it was ever a movie, I feel like it could even be a cult classic.
It would
Really.
be a
Yeah.
cult classic, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you've seen Edge of Tomorrow, and there's like a
Yeah.
and you could have a lot of fun with like the idea of just someone dying and coming back in the same
Over and
place.
over.
And so that was kind of my pitch, and I thought it could be like just really fun. Just in terms of like as we're talking about things that shouldn't be adapted versus things that should be adapted. And I like yours too because it takes a fresh spin on like
Oh
just
yeah, I
adapt the
mean
lore.
an underwater city, like that's thriving at first. I mean it's great.
I mean, and then just with the rest of that video game series too, there's a lot of franchise potential if they do it right. And like, I would love to kind of see something like that too if it stays pretty faithful to the actual storytelling of it. Because I played some of the games and I don't get the story at all.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to kind of have something that's more streamlined.
Yeah, of
So-
course. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, because that's the thing. That's one of the things is that I mean, Hollywood's gonna think, okay, okay, that game was popular. Let's literally adapt
it one-to-one.
one-to-one. And not all video games will work that way.
Yeah.
Maybe they will, but then it'll just be your typical generic, like for Red Dead, like your typical generic Western film, you know. So it wouldn't hit the same. And then you have moments where it's like there's Max Payne where they did not even adapt anything whatsoever from like the actual material, and they just made it like its
shared
own
name.
thing. Yeah. So there's also that. Yeah.
But I think those are all like really good choices. I think they're also like untraditional. So
Yeah.
like in that BioShock one, like I think it's great, and I like yours too with like just because I could see a real animated approach too, and giving it like its own sense of style, you know.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess that's gonna wrap up our show for today.
I mean, any further thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, any
No?
thoughts?
No, you know what? As a matter of fact, just thank you as always for watching, guys.
Yeah.
Please
Or in listening. If
And
you're
listening.
Yeah.
like, share, subscribe. Please put a comment. Notifications on YouTube so you know when we come out every week. Maybe do the same for Instagram. I don't know.
And
Like,
Spotify.
this is just a good push for getting you guys.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Instagram.
Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You know, if you're really enjoying the show, we'll really appreciate that.
Yeah. And well, that's gonna be our episode for today. I was Brian. I'm Brian Delgado.
I'm Joshua Mejia.
And I'm Joshua Letona.
And thank you so much for tuning into Unemployed Film Snobs, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.